Welcome, everyone, to the One-Room Schoolhouse in Jordan Village, the SS number 4. Come on in. It was built in 1859, and as you can see, watch your step, make your way into the cloak room. Girls, you may follow me on my side. Please, boys, you will go to the other side and remain on your side of the room. Follow through the cloak room, please. Come this way. You may put your bonnets and your caps and hats on the hooks. Don't mind the skipping ropes, ladies. You may take those out for recess when the time comes. Come this way. Welcome to the One-Room Schoolhouse. I'm Beth, the interpreter at the Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center, but I also portray Miss Welstead, who really was the school mistress here in 1908. She stayed here in 1909 as well, before she left and moved on to other things. Agnes was about 20 years of age when she started here. Her parents lived in St. Catharines, just across from the Welland Canal, and she had 3 sisters, Georgiana, Grace, and Ruth Welstead. Miss Welstead was a miss, of course, because back then you couldn't be married if you were a young lady and teach at the same time. You had a house to look after, children to raise once you were married, and there was no time for a second career. Of course, the schoolmasters, they could be married and they could continue teaching, but not the young ladies. Of course, as much as the pupils had their rules, the teachers had rules as well. And may I read you one rule that was certainly important? We just discussed it. Marriage or other unseemly behavior by women teachers is certainly a call for more proper conduct. So my wedding ring is not on today. If you look around, and I'll call you my young pupils, girls and boys, you'll see the One-Room Schoolhouse is exactly that, one room. This answered the question for the long distance that the rural children in the farming community had to travel to. And the One-Room Schoolhouses were placed about every 3 concessions, and this helped, of course, limit the time travel that they would be walking. There weren't as many school buses in the rural areas. They were mostly in the urban areas until about more the 50s and 60s. And that is when the One-Room Schoolhouses did start closing up. This One-Room Schoolhouse, built in 1859, finally closed up in 1948 because just down the road on Highway 8, King Street, they were building a larger school with many more rooms, and those schools were called consolidated schools. Everything is here in the One-Room Schoolhouse. Miss Welstead didn't have to travel from one room to another. Everything was at her fingertips. You'll see that the music room is right here. And if we look way over to the other side of the classroom, you'll see the music board. That is actually an authentic artifact from 1908 and even before, used by Miss Welstead. In the far corner, you'll see the library room, now known in many schools as the Learning Commons. But books were expensive, paper expensive, and these books are behind glass doors. They certainly would be kept there and treasured until Miss Welstead was requested to take one out, but the pupils never went home with them. And of course, with paper being expensive, they used their slate boards with their slate pencils. And that, of course, saved paper and many trees, if you will. And they could always turn to the other side. And when the time came, they would just erase it and start again. How convenient is that? I want you also to look at the boards at the front. Miss Welstead could do all of these subjects on one board. Arithmetic, spelling, of course. And if you take a look at the far side, the memory gem, so important because memorization was important. And we have taken the memory gem from Ella Wheeler. Do you wish the world were happy? Then remember day by day just to scatter seeds of kindness as you pass along the way. One hopes that the pupils would not only memorize it, but take it to heart and practice that each and every day. Miss Welstead taught here for just 1.5 or 2 years. But she did enjoy her time, and her pupil, Miss Aileen Snur, who became the postmistress of Jordan Village, later said she was a very good and kind schoolmistress. One likes to think that she was well respected. And of course she was in the village of Jordan, a schoolmistress or master, well respected. Their authority was never questioned, not only because they had the strap, but also because of the rules that had to be followed. Miss Welstead ran a tight ship in her schoolhouse. And of course, if you look at the classroom once more, you'll see the straight rows, the wide aisles, and boys separated from girls. You may not be able to tell right now, but as one walks up to the back of the classroom and then back down to the front of the classroom, the floor indeed does have a slant to it. And this way, the schoolmistress or master could view the pupils, the troublemaking grade 8s at the back of the classroom, and those troublemaking grade 8s could, of course, look over the heads of the grade 7s, 6s, 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s at the front, and hopefully focus on what Miss Welstead was teaching. Of course, Miss Welstead, she ran that tight ship. She had the rules for pupils, and I think we should go over a few. Rule number 3, never make noises or disturb your neighbors as they work. Number 4, be silent during classes. Do not speak unless absolutely necessary. Do not leave your seat without permission. And number 9, go quietly in and out of the classroom. But number 1 is my favorite. Respect your school teacher, obey, and accept punishment. And of course, that strap might come out. Now, if you're lucky enough, you might get a warning, and she might come down on your desk like so. Make sure your hand isn't there. But invariably, the discipline might meet that misconduct, and you might have to hold out your hand. It does say obey and accept punishment, so please hold out your hand. And Miss Welstead would come down with a quick slap. You'd be left with a hot, burning mark for the rest of the day. Oh, you would feel it, certainly. But, my young ladies and gentlemen, please remember that you are the example. She not only wants to make sure that you nip your bad behavior in the bud, but please, no copycats in the class. Again, you are the example. And you'd be sobbing your little heart out. Of course, Mom and Dad were in the general store down the street, heard about it at recess because your best friend or brother or sister told on you, and you know Mom and Dad are waiting in the laneway to give you double, if not triple, the whammy of punishment. I think that you would be eating standing up by the end of the evening supper because it would be just a little too tender. Your parents not only followed Miss Welstead's discipline, but of course, they backed her up, and they would soon be backing you up, girls and boys. So please remember to mind your manners, sit up straight in this classroom. Of course, some of the punishment wasn't always dealt out so badly, and corporal punishment is illegal in Canada now, but you might have to be asked to go to the board. Given a piece of chalk, draw a circle, find the point, and then your nose would be going on that point, standing with your hands behind you, and depending on the mood of the schoolmistress or master, perhaps up on your toes as well. You might be asked to place a book on your head. I always make sure that that ribbon is right in front so that my young pupils who visit here remember their discipline. Of course, books go a long way, and you might be asked to place the books on your head. Good for the posture, you know. A straight back, a firm brace of legs, and you certainly would learn your lesson for that day. Of course, in the classroom, silence is golden. Children were expected to listen to the adults and not say anything unless spoken to. And that was certainly followed for many, many years. But I will tell you that Jordan Schoolhouse had a bit of a reputation. These children had the priority of farm work, and they missed many, many days of school. And I'm sure that Miss Welstead would have come up to many 14, 15, 16-year-old young men, and their focus wasn't on their education. Probably most likely the harvesting, planting and seeding in the spring. Now, we talked about everything being in the one-room schoolhouse. I will tell you though that there was no electricity here in 1908. And if you look up to the lantern, you'll note that despite the lights that are on in the classroom, those are usually turned off, and we spend the day in the dimness of the classroom. The children who time travel here for the day and play the pupils in Miss Welstead's classroom really get the ambience of what it was like in 1908. That lantern, of course, is there, and it wouldn't give much light. But if you look around the classroom, you'll see the windows that were placed in the schoolhouse walls. They are no longer here, but at the back of the classroom, there were 2 windows also there. And we came in on the south side of the building. Those doors were always placed on the south side so that the north winds wouldn't venture into the classroom. Well, how did they heat the classroom? There's no modern furnace as well as no electricity. But note we have our wood stove here, and my pupils get excited when they can place a piece of wood inside. Now, we don't like it, of course, it's against fire inspection code, but we go on to tell them that they're community-minded pupils back in 1908, and they would chop a few extra pieces of wood and bring them into school. You would donate what was plentiful on your farm. Miss Welstead would help you out by drawing some mittens that were wetting on the way to school, or some socks. She might even make herself a cup of tea. And on those cold winter days, she would discuss how you would be community-minded, sharing what is plentiful, and donating vegetables for the pot of soup that they would make in the classroom. The young ladies would be cutting up the vegetables, the gentlemen lighting the fire of the wood stove and bringing in some water, heating it up. And if a young man were brave enough to kill a chicken the night before and bring in some extra chicken meat, well, you'd have a lovely pot of soup burning away there, and good enough for your tin cup at dinner time to warm your insides for the long walk home. It was a very busy classroom, of course, with 8 grades, grade 1 to grade 8. And Miss Welstead had to keep on her toes. Now, we not only have the electricity gone and the modern furnace, but there's something that is missing in the classroom, and that would have been the outhouse, the one-holer. Of course, many of you might have experiences with that, but the other thing is paper is expensive, and they wouldn't have had modern toilet paper, so my pupils always come up with the wonderful answer of leaves. But what can you do in the winter when the trees have no leaves? The old Eaton's catalog, and that gave enough paper for the pupils to use that in the outhouses. I did have a teacher who once brought in the Scholastic Book magazine papers, and I did notice at the end when I cleaned the outhouses that that paper had been used. So good for them for taking that challenge. Well, I hope you've enjoyed a bit of the afternoon here. I'd love to hear some questions or comments about your own experiences as well. One is in the classroom portraying the schoolmistress. One has to keep up with the penmanship. And I will say that I use my right hand. Remember, you would get your fingers slapped if you were using your left hand. They would nip that bad behavior in the bud, cure you of that little behavior, and make sure you were writing with your right hand using pen and ink.
What was the average salary of the schoolmistress in 1908?
Well, Miss Welstead didn't make a lot of money back then because, of course, equal pay was not in existence. She would have made about $300 for the year, and the schoolmasters a little bit more.
Can you tell us about some of the popular recess games and some of the antics the kids got up to here?
Oh my goodness, trouble was one of them. Miss Welstead would have to keep a sharp eye on them. We are very close to a cemetery, and there is write-ups in the minutes about how the youngsters would go find some bones from the spring washout and place them on the teacher's desk. And the schoolmistress, usually her, would be horrified, of course, to find a human bone on the desk. But usually There would be games of stilts. How many of you remember walking on stilts? Maybe your fathers made them. We do have tug of war, of course, always an enjoyable game. And if you remember Simon Says, the game in 1908 was called Grandmother's Footsteps, and it was quite like that. And then, of course, the regular tag games, but the one that I play with my 1908 pupils, of course, are always chickens come home, the fox is in the middle chasing the chickens, and then in the end, the chickens turn into the foxes so that if one chicken survives, good luck to you. In the classroom on rainy days, we're not always, a while since I've done this, you'll be able to get the ball inside the cup. Great for hand and eye coordination, but let's not forget also the spinning top. Something so easy to make out of wood, but the children really love playing with that. Now, I told you everything had a purpose or reason to it. Miss Welstead knew that the young girls and boys would be working hard on the farms around Jordan, and hand and eye coordination is so important when you're chopping wood in the morning, or the young ladies threading through the eye of the needle and doing their embroidery work and sewing. These games were fun, but they also had purpose to them.
Somebody asked, how do you register for the workshops, and is there an age restriction?
There is not an age restriction. We're talking about cyber seniors, so we're looking at senior age for these workshops. And if Olivia can turn her camera, there will be a link at the end. You can go through the Town of Lincoln, but this one takes you directly townoflincoln.perfectmind.com. You'll create your account with an email and password. You just go on to click Adult Senior Programs. We're Creative Arts. And then the Museum Memories is what the workshops are called. And you can choose 1, 2, 3, or 4, all of the workshops for March 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Those workshops are in the morning from 10 to 11:30.
Thank you. And all of the museum workshops are on that website as well. So if you're interested in other things like painting or the other workshops we have, you'll be able to find them there. So we have a question here about holiday celebrations like Valentine's Day.
Oh, Valentine's Day is one of my favorites next to the Christmas program that we do for the children. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But in Valentine's Day time, always a box was out and decorated by the pupils of the classroom. And then over the week or two, the pupils would bring their homemade Valentine's cards from home and put them in the box. Now for our Valentine's program, which we run 10 days prior to Valentine's Day, our children spend the afternoon, instead of reading comprehension, we make little fans out of paper, and it's called the fan language. And of course, the young lady going to a dance had to watch how she perched the fan in her hands. If she dropped it in front of someone, it meant we will be friends. If she put it to her lips, it might mean kiss me. The language of the fan, which you can look up on Google, is very, very important. And my young pupils here who come and visit are just a little horrified if they're waving their fan the wrong way, but they spend the afternoon and really enjoy adding ribbon and crayons to their paper fans.
Can you talk a bit about Christmas in the schoolhouse?
Christmas is wonderful here. We get a real Christmas tree. We put real garland up, and we have branches, evergreen branches along the windowsills. Back then, we discussed, of course, the traditions and customs. There were many people from Great Britain who settled here, many people from Pennsylvania as well, and many people from Germany. And so the custom of the Christmas tree came in. The children love the smell of it in here, and we take the afternoon while they string popcorn. We usually have them around the tree, which is a wonderful picture for any visiting parent or teacher. And I read a holiday story, or from the Bible, the nativity story, depending on what school comes here to visit. And we do discuss, prior to time traveling, everyone's customs and traditions, where their family originally came from. And it's quite an engaging conversation, and it brings up many traditions from all around the world. So we're very inclusive here, but the afternoon is a delight. And I do have to always remind the children not to eat the popcorn because Farmer John was storing it in his barn with the cows.
We have one last question, and I think they might have missed it in the talk. Just a question about the types of punishments the students would get if they didn't behave. So just a quick recap?
Yes, just a quick recap. Of course, there was the strap that I showed earlier. They might get the cane on their hand as well. But more than likely or not, Miss Welstead would have you up at the front of the board. You would draw a circle on the board, find the middle, and then she would ask you to turn and put your nose right on the point, hands behind you, and she might even ask you to go up on your tiptoes until your discipline is done. Books on the head help the posture and help to remind you how naughty you were and that you wouldn't repeat your offense again. Or holding books in the hands was also very common. And if I get a dad visiting the schoolhouse, this is the treatment that he gets with the tiptoes up. And it is a wonderful picture taking time as well. But remember, Miss Welstead didn't want you to repeat your offense. And she also wanted to nip the bad behavior so there would be no copycats in the class either. Thank you for joining us this afternoon at the Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center in our 1859 schoolhouse.